The last part of the puzzle, tanks 9 through 12 of the biome cycle experiment. Which of these tanks performs the best and avoids the uglies? 4 tanks, the livest of the live with wet Gulf rock, Real Reef cured but artificial rock, the Aquaforest Life Source Method, and the established MarinePure Brick. We want to know what the best way possible is to start a new tank. This is BRStv Investigates, and we're going to find out. Starting with tank 9 of 12, the wet Gulf rock. This dry rock, dropped in the ocean, cultured there for years, comes covered in sponges in life, and then shipped in water overnight. This should be the livest rock of the bunch and hopefully show the EDA diversity and balance, but it only hits one of those marks. Week 1, this is a totally different experience because of the amount of life on the rock, probably most notably the coralline and colored sponges. Hands down, this is the best looking natural rock there is. There are a bunch of healthy crabs and even predatory crabs, which did catch a couple of clowns along the way. Week 2 is more of the same, but you can see that some of the organics are starting to build up in the sand. There's a reality that there's a lot of organics in this type of rock that are going to break down. In person, you can see it in the yellow or orange tint in the water as well. Our initial aquabiomics eDNA test comes in with a microbiome diversity score in the 28th percentile, which is the best of any tank at this point. The biome balance is just an 8th percentile, so while there is some diversity, it's not in ratios typical to a reef tank. Week 3 largely looks the same other than crabs moving the sand around and some of the sponge dying off, which is fairly normal. Filter feeding organisms often don't do very well in newer tanks. Week 4, no visual surprises, but the diversity score drops to a 12th percentile, but still best of the pack. It's still likely that some organisms are outcompeting others in the new environment, but the balance jumps up to a 44th percentile with 4 of the 5 majors now represented in the biome stack. Microcrustaceans are now visible as well. Week 5, the LPS lights come on. Other than the organics collecting the sand, the rock looks stellar. I'd almost call this dream level live rock. Week 5, pretty much the same, better than live rock. This is ocean rock, full of color. This closely matches my experience with Gulf rock 18 years ago. Week 7, you can see hints of the stuff in the sand, which becomes more prevalent in week 8. There's now cyano and algae accumulating in the tank. Week 9, we blow off the surface of the rock and siphon the sand. The sponge is thinning and there are some chunks in the sand, but otherwise it looks pretty good. Week 10, some of the photosynthetically uglies come back, not just in the sand, but on the surface of the rock. It's also darkening with organisms growing on it. You can really see it when you compare week 5 and week 10 shots side by side. Diversity climbs a bit to the 18th percentile and still number 1 at this point, but balance drops to the 35th percentile and 10 weeks in is actually the worst of all 12 tanks. Week 11, the much brighter SPS lights come on and the photosynthetic pests come right with it. Week 12 gets pretty overwhelmed with cyano. Week 13, a bacterial bloom in the water makes the water hazy as well. Week 14, not all that uncommon to cyano, it just largely decides to disappear, but the algae is taking hold of the tank. We end week 15 with a tank that just doesn't look good. Now, interestingly enough, the diversity score jumps all the way up to 54th percentile and by far the highest. In fact, it's 4 for 4 for the most diverse of all 12 tanks at any point in the experiment. However, the balance drops even further to the 17th percentile, and to be frank, it shows in the tank the right things are not winning, nor are they in balance with each other. There are a few notables about the Gulf rock. First, the most live of the rocks we had the most diversity. However, we've also come to believe that the diversity and counting the sheer number of microorganisms should not immediately be considered a good thing. Looking across all of these tanks, the balance score, the right things in a reasonable ratio to each other, seems to be more indicative of the type of results we want to achieve in a tank. There's another notable here. This level of uglies is not what I ran into 18 years ago using live Gulf rock on my first tank, and there's a good reason why. Back then I was running lower compact fluorescent lighting, probably similar to LPS settings. I had crabs, snails, cucumbers, tanks, and I was doing a lot of water changes to keep the nutrients down. Even using GFO when needed, all effective methods, but I now believe are various degrees of band-aids to an avoidable problem. This type of rock would benefit a lot from a prolonged dark period, often referred to as cooking or dark curing. Let the organics break down, the photosynthetics die off. Some of the desirables may go with that, so it might be a tough pill to swallow, but it's still worth it. I will say one thing though, as bad as it looks right now, it does get better, and at times the nicest looking tank of the 12, and one of only 4 tanks that avoided or beat the dreaded orange diatom explosion. Next up, Real Reef Rock, dry sand tank. This is a purple artificial rock which has been cured in salt water for a prolonged period of time and comes wrapped in moist newspaper. It's safe to assume that it's been out of water for weeks to months when you buy it. So it will be interesting to see how live it really is. Week 1, purple rock, white sand, but both clean. Same thing week 2, diversity score is 17, which is third best. Balance score 1 percentile, and basically every tank out there is more balanced than this one, just 2 weeks in. Week 3 and 4, virtually no change at all, just a clean looking tank. Diversity drops to a 3 percentile and balance to a 7 with the lights out. One notable here is, well, out of the box, the rock's not my favorite color, and without the lights on, it's not overly impressive. Wait till we turn the lights on to be the judge. Week 5, we turn on the LPS lights, and this rock now looks great and achieves that established tank look. Most people will be very happy with this look, and the purple look is now going to hide a lot of the uglies. Week 6, more of the same, looks solid. Week 7, the diatoms show up. Notice you can see them in the sand, but they're somewhat hidden on the rock. Week 8, the diatoms are gone as fast as they came. Week 9 is pristine, really no signs of anything in the tank. Week 10 ultimately finished almost identical to week 5, and most people would be pretty happy with the tank that looks like this 10 weeks in. Diversity score in the 10 percentile, which is actually the second best at this point. More interesting, the balance score jumps up to an 88 percentile, which is the best of the 12 tanks after 10 weeks, 6 of which are under LPS lighting. Now we crank up the SPS lighting. Week 11 looks great, week 12 looks great, week 13 looks great, week 14 looks great, and week 15, the only thing I can see is maybe a small patch of cyano in the center. Diversity percentile of 31, or the third highest, and balance percentile of 82, which finishes phase 1 of the experiment with the second highest balance score. Only beat out by the control at this point. However, it is worth noting that even though they have a similar score, they got there in different ways. The control has more families in a smaller proportion, whereas the Real Reef finishes with 2 of the major families dominating. One of them is that free-living family that's common to lower nutrient pristine reefs. The difference may be the result of the seawater curing process that Real Reef goes through. Overall, the Real Reef ends phase 1 looking great and some of the best DNA results with it, and matches most of my experiences with Real Reef Rock. There are issues that come in phase 2, the pest phase, and you'll see those soon. Next, the Aquaforest approach. This includes the Life Bio seeded media in the sump area and the Aquaforest Life Source mud. In this case, we actually dosed the reef mud to the tank once a week for the entire test. Dry rock, but we use Aquaforest dry finer grade sand. I've personally never dosed reef mud before, but it sure would be awesome if it worked, because a bag of Life Source mud is low cost and easy. Week 1 looks like the rest, clean. Week 2, clean as well, with a 2-week diversity 6 percentile score and a balance in the 4 percentile. Week 3 looks visually the same. Not surprisingly, week 4 does as well. We finished the dark period with an eDNA diversity in the 5th percentile, and none of the tanks do well in that front. But after 4 weeks, the balance just jumped all the way up to the 70th percentile, and the biome from the mud is indeed migrated throughout the tank better than all but 2 tanks and dramatically better than the control. One note here, look how similar the biome makeup looks between the ocean direct sand and the Aquaforest Life Source tank. Ratios are different, but the makeup is nearly identical, which is interesting because the ocean direct sand and the Aquaforest muds are reef substrates from the ocean. Both seem to be living up to the claim of being a source of healthy biome for the tank. Week 5, we turn the lights on to the LPS zone, looks clean. Then week 6, the diatoms come. I'll note that the diatoms are a bit browner. This is just a theory, but I believe the mud might be sticking to some of the slime surface and giving it that color. Week 7, the diatom bloom is still visible, but starts to dissipate by week 8, so it's a bit longer here. I believe that it's the mud that we're seeing sticking to the tank's biofilm on this white rock. Week 9, we clean all the tanks by blowing out the surface and siphoning the sand, and it comes off very easily. Week 10, it stays off. This is just a bit different experience, but the diversity score lands at the 7 percentile and balance 46 percentile. Again, the Ocean Direct and Aquaforest Life Source seem to be producing remarkably similar results, and at week 10 look remarkably similar as well. Week 11, we turn on the SPS lights and maintains that clean look. Week 12, we see a bit of something develop in the sand, which gets just a bit darker by week 13 and more so by week 14. Week 15, 5 weeks of SPS lighting and end of phase 1. I think some of the mud is just settling out in the sand. Diversity score of 34 percentile, and actually the mud finishes as second best. Balance percentile 51, meaning it's better than half of the healthy tank's aquabiomics tests. Again, remarkably similar biome breakdown to that ocean direct sand. 2 substrates, uses biome donors, both from the ocean, and nearly identical results. For me, the jury's still out on dosing the mud because of the slight buildup of brown in the tank, but it's worth noting that in a live reef tank with higher flow, a good skimmer, and filter socks, the mud would not likely collect like this. Next up is starting biome with an established MarinePure Brick from a multi-year established tank. Same tank as what seeded the Red Sea 900 on our set. This is also the one I have the high hopes for because I think bricks could likely be cultured in huge quantities and become a reliable microbiome solution for reefers. However, this tank had mixed results throughout the test, ugly for a lot of it, introduced a bunch of pests, but also finished phase 2 as one of the best looking tanks we had and one of only 4 that have beat those aggressive diatoms. Week 1 looks pretty clean, except you can see in week 1 we already have aptasia in the tank from the brick. Week 2 clean as well with diversity percentile of 14 and a balance percentile of 18. Week 3 clean, no signs of additional pests in the tank. Week 4 the tank actually looks like it's getting cleaner. Diversity percentile of 2, which is surprising. I would have assumed they would have brought in more with it. Balance also pretty low at the 15th percentile. Week 5, we turn the LPS lights on and a big dark diatom explosion happens. It's notable that it's much darker on the surface of the brick or the donor material than other areas of the tank. Week 6, it turns green. The brown to green seems to be common for the tanks that start with a biome from an established tank. Also, like those other established tank donors, you can see microcrustaceans in the tank now. Week 7, the green goes away everywhere in the tank but the brick, which is now growing algae. Week 8, the hair algae is on the brick but nowhere else, and a lot more microcrustaceans. Week 9, we clean the tank, including the back, and finish week 10 with the LPS period, which is becoming a green brick, but you can see the tube worms are now growing in the brick as well. Diversity, 2 percentile, still low, but the balance jumps all the way up to 44. At this point, I'd say it's clear we messed up by not putting this brick in the dark sump area of the tank. Even though the brick came from a dark sump, it had a ton of microscopic photosynthetics. Basically, we're fueling those emerging photosynthetics by putting the brick under the display light. The brick was just too big, and in hindsight, we should have just cut it down to size to put it in the sump. However, sometimes we have happy accidents because we learned a lot from this tank as it progresses through the phases. Week 11, SPS light comes on, and it's another time where algae starts to die off when you'd expect it to explode. Week 12, the algae continues to grow, but pale and bleached. But notice that the rock and sand continues to stay clean. Something is preventing the algae from spreading off the brick, even after being lit for 2 months. Week 13, this tank has more tiny snails, pod limpets, and other microcrustaceans than any other tank. But notice on the rock and sand, you see small areas turning brown. Week 14, some of the undesirables finally migrate to the rock, and we finish week 15 with a lot of gunk all over the tank, sand, and rock. I can't help but imagine the microbial war going on in this tank, the sand and rock holding its own until the photosynthetics in the brick sent in an overwhelming force. But for the first time ever, you don't have to imagine it. It's in the data as well. The Aquabiomics eDNA diversity score of a 9 percentile, and guess what? The balance or measurement of the right things in the right balance, dropping all the way to a 1 percentile in virtually every tank that Aquabiomics has ever tested being better. Something is going wrong with the microbiome in this tank. You can see it with the naked eye, and now a deeper look into the unseen microbial war as well. This tank finished phase 1 poorly. But that's not the end. Time for phase 2 of our experiment and how this all fits together. Regardless of where all 12 of the tanks landed after 15 weeks, some awesome and others covered in all kinds of nasties. But there's one thing nearly all of us are wondering. Those Stairlish type tanks, like the Control, performed really well, but they didn't have to deal with the nasties that come from the ocean or other tanks. What happens if they did? Because eventually they will have to deal with what comes in on the corals, fish, and inverts. In fact, what if we scrub it all off and suck out all the nasties from the 12 tanks and make a slurry of the worst and dose it to all of these tanks? In fact, dose it twice to make sure they have to beat it. Which of these will be able to fight it off and not get overrun with the rapid introduction of pests? Well, that's next. 4 of these tanks beat the pest slurry, 8 don't. And it's right here in the BRStv Investigates Biome Cycle playlist.